All right, we're live. Welcome to Master of the Game. I'm Juice, and today decided to do a live stream at this time because we were celebrating a birthday for my 6-year-old. It was quite a jam-packed day of going to the store and cake decorating and all that good stuff. But last night, while I was streaming my Descent into Avernus game, had an old coworker friend reach out, my friend John, and he and some friends and their girlfriends or wives, I think it was girlfriends, are looking to start playing D&D. One of the people has minimal experience, and the rest of them have zero experience. And that's cool. I thought it was really awesome that he reached out to me, and I love helping people out when they're getting into this hobby. So, you know, hopefully he joins in the chat and posts some questions, and I can help him on his start into tabletop RPGs. But a couple things I do want to say with that. It's easy to look at this hobby as something that is overwhelming. There's a lot to it, and I completely understand that. The cool thing about our hobby is that it's basically just playing pretend. I mean, we grew up doing this. If you've seen kids play with action figures or Barbies or G.I. Joes or any of that stuff, they are basically doing what we do even as adults when we play these RPGs. The difference is you have dice that are your resolution mechanic. You can use the dice as much or as little as you want with your group. Different games have different rules as it pertains to the dice and things like that. I do have a series about getting into tabletop RPGs from the bottom, and I will be sure to send that to you, John. You guys can check it out. I have a playlist for it. If you go, I think it's beginners tabletop or tabletop RPG basics or something like that. Let me pull that up and check it out. I should have been more prepared on this, but that's okay. I did it a few years ago, and I did it because I was getting a lot of questions back then about what people should do if they've never played before, things like that. And so I tried to take it in the most basic way possible and elaborate on it as I went on with the series. These are not the playlists. Hang on. Created playlists. Here we go. There we go. And then I'm going to share my screen. I hope this works. It will. Just give me a second. I'll make it work. I promise. Here we go. All right. So this, if you go to my site, that is not how I want this to look. So hang on. If you go to my site, though, or my YouTube, you can go to my account, go into the playlists, and you can find all the playlists. In here, if you scroll down, it will be in here. Intro to D&D Basics. That one's not the best series. I need to redo that one, to be honest. But this one right here, Introduction to Tabletop RPGs or Pen and Paper Games. If you click that, if you've never, ever played, this might help you. Let me view the full playlist so you can see the type of videos. What is a tabletop RPG? What is the GM's role? Which tabletop RPG systems are the best? Obviously, you're playing D&D, so you can kind of skip some of these. What is a session 0? I think is a really good video for you if you've never, ever played a tabletop RPG. How to play for beginners, necessary rules, things like that. 5 reasons tabletop RPGs are beneficial. Ideal number of players. When should I introduce? That one doesn't matter as much either. So you got different things here, right? I think that will definitely help you. Also, I haven't looked at this in a while, but my intro to D&D basics. Some of these are really good. I do think these are very helpful for new players, new GMs. there are some mistakes in some of the videos. I know that's the case. Most of these videos I did over 5 years ago. So some of them are newer, but some of them are really old. So, talks about skills and tool proficiencies. I think there's some errors in that video and things like that. But yeah, so anyways, I do have some resources like that. And if you find something that's wrong in any of these videos, just let me know. I will go back and try to fix them, things like that. But yeah, so anyways, with that, Cameron says, yeah, definitely feel like a kid when I'm playing solo games. I wonder how it would have been to first get into D&D as a child instead of as a teenager. I've played with my daughter on this channel. It's been a couple years. Well, not a couple. It's been about a year. When YouTube started cracking down on, kids being in YouTube videos and stuff, we stopped. At least we stopped streaming. I think we played one more time outside of that, and we've done some board games and stuff. Really D&D for kids is super easy. You can see how kids, they're just used to playing make-believe. Now, in a tabletop RPG, the very first thing you're going to want to do, like I said, is focus on session 0. When you meet with your group, before actually making your characters, figure out what you expect out of the game. Are you expecting to, play a lot of combat or things like that? Like, what are your expectations? And you might not like it the first couple times, or other people might not like it. But if you give it a chance, I think it'll work itself out. Now, because you are new, I do think, especially if you're running a game for the first time, I do think you should pick up the D&D Essentials kit or the starter set. I do think the Essentials kit is better. It's going to come with everything you need. It comes with, I believe the Essentials kit comes with characters. I don't remember. Blank character sheets, rule book, teaches you how to create characters. So this one just teaches you how to create them. It does not have pre-gens, but it has some nice little accessories for the table. Initiative cards, condition cards, the dice you're going to need. It has an adventure for the person running the game. The adventure is probably a little bit easier than the starter set. The starter set is going to come with, this does come with pre-generated characters, so you won't have to make characters. It's got 4 to choose from. It's going to have, again, an adventure. It's going to have a rule book, and it's going to have dice. There's not as much in this as there is in the other box set, and they're both about the same price, I believe. So this was $20. I think you can get it on Amazon for like $10. This one is $25. And again, I think you can get it for like $10-15 on Amazon. So I would start with one of those. And that's going to get you going. I do not recommend for people starting out who have never played tabletop RPGs before or who have never run a game. I do not recommend starting a homebrew game. The things that I found were difficult for me when I started playing D&D, when I started running it, were trying to get the players to go in a certain direction, right? And you're going to hear terms like railroad and sandbox. Sandbox is like you just drop some players in the middle of a sandbox and let them go whichever direction they want. That is more difficult for people that don't have the tools yet. They haven't developed the tools on how to run games yet. Whereas a railroad is kind of what you would think of. You have the players, you put them on a track. They can really go one way, just like a train, right? One way, boom. And I don't think that's a problem. I actually think for all new players, completely fine to do a railroad. And it's fairly simple to do a railroad without making it feel like you want the players to feel like they can make choices. You do want them to be able to go into directions they want to go. For example, you might want to start the players in a city. And you, as the person running the game, know there's something bad happening east of the city in a cave. Now, the players don't know that. They're in a city. they can get clues in the city without having to seek it out, right? Maybe they are in a tavern and they overhear the table next to them talking about it. Maybe they are walking through the streets and someone rushes into town from, from outside and is talking about, they found something out in the woods that leads the players that direction. And maybe the next clue is that there's a body in the woods, and maybe next to the body there's footprints, that lead to this cave. But if the players want to go to the store, let them go to the store. If they want to go to the tavern and drink and have some fun there, let them do those things. If they want to just travel and see the mountainside, whatever, let them do what they want. The thing is, there's no one way to run a game. There's no one way to play the game. And I think it's important to, again, let the players do what they want, right? That is the great thing about this hobby compared to video games. You're not stuck within the confines of the programming. Maybe you wanted them to go to this cave and they just never went to the cave. Okay, so change up the story, change up what you think would be fun. Maybe a fight breaks out at the tavern, and the guy who the players knocked out goes to jail because the players were slick and were able to explain to the sheriff or the guards that, yeah, the guy started it, and they made their persuasion check with, which is one of their skills. And now that guy, when he gets out of, jail in a couple days for his bar fight, maybe he is now a sworn enemy of them for whatever reason. Maybe him being locked up for a few days made it so he couldn't work, and maybe he didn't have food because he didn't have the money for food for his children, and now he's just furious and he's got a blood feud with the characters. And maybe he's not a bad guy. He just, because he couldn't provide for his family for a few days, is so pushed over the edge that he becomes bad, or at least in the eyes of the players, is the bad guy. There's so many stories you can tell in this game, and it's really fun. But again, I would still focus on doing a pre-written adventure, and the Essentials Kit and the Starter Set are the perfect place to start. If you're not going to start with those, look at some of the other ones. I've got a bunch up here. You've got, if you want to mess with giants, you got Storm King's Thunder. If you want to mess with dragons, you can do Tyranny of Dragons. And if you're running those are really difficult. There's a good chance as players you're going to die. The encounters are difficult, and that's just the way it is. The one thing I will say, especially as you're learning as a DM, do not make up numbers. Go with whatever you roll on the dice, and roll it in front of people, okay? You're all learning. You're learning how difficult the system is. You're learning how easy it is. You're learning how the mechanics of the game work. Once you start to understand those things, you can then adjust the adventures accordingly. If you want to give your characters a lot of magic items, you can. If you don't want to give them a lot of magic items, you don't have to. Maybe you make your monsters less lethal, There's a lot of ways to do it. Now, again, the hardest thing for me when I was getting into running games was trying to give good enough hooks to get my players to go the directions I thought would be more interesting. I used to spend so much time prepping. In fact, I had a conversation with my friend Peter today about prep. He was prepping up to the last minute for his game tonight. And he runs a game on this channel on Thursdays, which is a Call of Cthulhu game. And in that, it's in 2008, and it's pretty wild. And us players throw him curveballs all the time. We go all sorts of directions I don't think he could plan for. But so he says he preps a lot. The more I've gamed, the less I've prepped. Now, it still depends, I think, on the system I run or I'm playing. But if I'm playing 5e, for example, I don't do as much prep as I used to. My Descent into Avernus game from last night, I don't know where that, oh, here it is. my Descent into Avernus game from last night. This is my little binder. I always make a binder for me. It helps me keep track of things. I don't do a ton of prep for it. One, it's in module, so it's easy to go through. My notes for last night were not anything other than combat stuff. So it's that bottom half of the sheet. You can't see it well. That's it. It's the bottom half of that page. They fought shadows, specters, minotaurs, Duraches, mesoliths, and a giant scorpion, and then a monk. Boom. So that's what I did. I just wrote out their hit points and armor class. That is it. And then I had the book. I use D&D Beyond, so I was still following the book through there, but which is kind of nice because you can just open a new tab with the monster stats. But when I'm prepping, I literally just take the stat blocks for the combat encounters I know or have a feeling are coming up. I also I read the module for where I think they're going, or the possible 2 or 3 areas I think they're going. And I from there, I then have an idea of what could happen. In the game, I still look at it and reference it, but I've read it ahead of time. Now, Descent into Avernus, I have read, so the stuff I ran last night, I have read 3 times now. I read it a year ago when we started, a year and a half ago when we started our campaign, because I think I almost read up to this point when we started it. But then I read it again about 2 months ago, before our previous session, and then I read it again last week before our game last night. So I had an idea of what was going on. Then, obviously, during the game, I read the read aloud text and go from there. The thing I will say is they don't always provide read aloud text. And one of the things me and my players were talking about last night off stream is doing bullet points. So rather than writing a paragraph, bullet points of key, interesting facts about what's on the table, what's on the bookshelf, what's in this room, what's in the next room, and having it organized by room, is really helpful. Bullet points are the best way to do it, I think, because you don't get caught up reading the blocks of text. You look at it and you go, oh, okay, there's parchment paper of a unfinished note. Great. So then maybe you don't even say right there what's on the note. Maybe you improvise what's on the note. There's a lot of ways you can do that. I've just found that I think stuff like that is helpful. And I'll be honest, Nate from WSD20 and Luke from the DM Lair are the ones who mentioned it. And I think that, again, that is perfect sound advice, I think, for a lot of people. Now, I am going to pull up some other notes I've had for a game, and I'm going to share those with you guys. I use Google Drive for my games and Google Docs. A lot of times I'll put my prep in there, especially for homebrew games. I am going to share something that's pretty old. Let's go with... Should I do Black Rock Adventures? Maybe I should. I don't think anyone from that game watches my videos. So... let's go here. Let's just pull up episode 6. Is that still? Okay. Let's go and share this. So website background. All right. So this is what I got. I start with the last session recap. That's how I start every single game. Usually I will do the recap. Now, in here... So, for example, the group added 2 new members to their party. The players went to the Scattered Cod Inn, or the Scattered Cod in the dock ward near Dale Village. Now, Scattered Cod was a tavern. The man, Jules, who played the card game with Riley, walked away with the chitin-smithed dagger, but did tell them to go to Chitin to learn more about this dagger. So I don't think the players knew that the dagger was from Chitin. It's another city in my homebrew world. But, yeah. So then... and again, I used bullet points for those pretty much. So then I did have a read aloud thing. And then this one as well. Port Obsidia is made up of the different regions of the city, right? Now this is not something I read to them at all. Okay. However, I did read this. down here, I listed some places that they could have went. That was just random names I came up with of different like inns and taverns and things like that. They ended up staying at the Clean Bean Inn and Tavern, and then they went to this place. So that's why those are green. Now I know, based on my color coding, they went there. For me, it was really easy. I made them make a wisdom save. Lowest score of 3 has a dream about Joy Krustyleaf, who was an NPC from earlier in the campaign. And then I had another, the lowest of 2 of the new players had a dream about a full moon on silhouette of a rider on a hill, and that's become a big part of my campaign at this point. So that happened. That was something I prepared. That was within the first 15 minutes of the game, right? Let them do what they wanted in town. Let them purchase. And this is a note for me. I didn't read this. This is just so I knew I was going to let them do what they wanted in town, right? Then they went and did their thing. This was the stuff I had prepped right here. A couple paragraphs. Nothing big. Heading east out of town. The group passed by. Blah, 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 blah. You know, if they would have stayed in town, it would have changed things, right? I did also add hooks that they picked up, right? So yeah, that's what I do. Not everyone does things like I do. To me, I find this is really helpful. Helps me, one, I can go back to it and I remember, okay, that's when I gave them this hook and then they went and did this. It also helps me stay focused. Now, another thing I'm going to share with you here in a second is I do outlines for my campaigns. So let's see if I can find, I don't know if I want to share that outline. Let's go with an outline for a campaign that is no longer on this channel. I can do, let's see. Follow the Plague Stone. And like, if you look at a lot of adventure modules, the chapters are the outlines, right? A lot of times it'll say, make sure the players are this level before they do this and that and things like that. Schedule. Sorry, I have a lot of documents in here. So it's going to take me a second, I think, to find this. This isn't campaign notes, isn't it? Let me open that in a different tab. Okay, so this is something different. This isn't my outline, but this is campaign notes. So let's pull this up. So this was from my Forgotten Throne campaign. I ran this about 2 years ago now. We ran this, I don't remember. We ended it prematurely. We had a couple players drop out, new players join. And as more players joined and the original cast left, the story just didn't have a strong connection to the newer players. So from my session 0, one of the things we decided we wanted the tone to feel like was Princess Bride mixed with the Muppets, Sweeney Todd. We did not go with that at all. In fact, we got away from that pretty quick. It got kind of dark. It became like dark fantasy. I did give this document, I gave access to this to the players, and they were able to add things to it as well. So as they met NPCs, I would put them in here. You know, one of the player characters was Eva, and this was her family. Another one was Renmer. He was my friend Tom, who's in my Blackrock game. These were his mother and father. We had some NPCs from the original town. Potential quests that were going on here. Which these eggs ended up being Sturge eggs, basically. Different places that they went to. They went to a few more, but... or they had heard about these places. So like the Lake of Heroes, West Valkar Mountains, things like that. Riverbend locations discovered. So this was within one town and like right around it. All the stuff that they had went to in there. A couple taverns, the library, a temple, community center, different family homes. I made notes of what was, for instance, Eva's family had a forge at their house. Renmer's father was training the guards. He was a retired general. And, you know, things like that. Did the same thing once they went to this location. I think we ended up settling on the Kraken crew. Unfortunately, the player who the Kraken crew name came from eventually left. And it ended that campaign, like really shortly after that. Different player characters. So here's Tom's character, little notes we made about his character as we played. Again, this stuff to me is very, very helpful. And as a DM, I can go in and pull things from it. I let the players have access to this. They were allowed to go in and add any notes they needed to about their character, about their family, about their personality, whatever they wanted. I told them to keep it kind of short, but it worked out. Hang on one second. So yeah, I let them add those notes themselves. Sorry about that, by the way. When characters died or players left, I made a note, took their stuff here, highlighted in red, came up with an excuse of why they left. So this character ended up dropping the game. We had said that her character took like a boat and left. I think we said that this character left with her. Was the same idea, because I think she left like a session later. And then I did make notes based on sessions for a minute. I stopped that real quick. We ended up playing like almost 20 sessions, I think. And things like that. So again, I think that's very helpful as a DM. And I think the group likes that too. You have notes about the NPCs, so they can go back and quickly look at things that they don't remember. And having group notes that are easily accessible with Google Drive is, again, it's a lifesaver. Let me catch up on some of these comments. Beamers, RQ, less lethal, Lex Luthor's weaker cousin. You know it. Bullet points are a lifesaver. I agree, Cameron. Drakenstone Castle, welcome, buddy. Improvising is key. Yes, I think improvising is a huge thing. I think it's one of my better qualities as a DM. I don't think I am the best DM. I'm just gonna throw it out there. I think I make a lot of mistakes, and I'm very critical of myself. Now, most players I've had have always said, really positive things. I know I'm harder on myself than I should be, but I'm always someone who's striving to be better. In fact, one of the things that's always helped me is when I'm helping other people with problems they have in their games, it forces me to look at their situation, from a different perspective than if it was me making those mistakes or having the same issues going on. And so then I start thinking of solutions to help them. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait, that is a good idea. I'm going to use that. So I do like to do things like that as well. I had a party who was awarded by the king at the end of the adventure their own real estate. They were so excited when they finally saw it for the first time. They were sad. It was ghetto. They spend all their gold fixing it up. So we had a campaign with a sorcerer that also had a background in alchemy, and they did a bunch of stuff to like turn it into a business with that character. We were playing Pathfinder First Edition before we switched to 5e, and because 5e didn't have good rules for any of that stuff, and with the core book and stuff, we let her make a new character when it started, but her character became an NPC in that town of Pine Run. It was awesome. Is there an online map maker you would say is easy to use? So John, thank you for coming. So I search Pinterest for maps. But again, it depends. I make a lot of my maps myself. So my homebrew world, I have, back in 2014 when 5e came out, I started running games in this town called Pine Run. And I had a map that I drew out in Photoshop, and my players, one of them was Nate from WASD20. He was starting to get into mapping around that time. His YouTube channel was brand spanking new. He made this. This was one of the first things he did on his YouTube channel. His channel's like huge now, over 100,000 subs. But and he does mapping and good D&D tips and things like that. But he drew this, and it's very, very close to what I had done on my map. There's some liberties, artistic freedom and things that he did that I love and are now part of it. But I drew out other maps of my world. So I know it's hard to see, but here's what I did. This is one portion of my world. here's a continent that I've run multiple campaigns in right here. Or is that? Oh, that one's not it. Sorry, that's the Forgotten Throne map. And then this one I've run multiple games in. This one's harder because it's in pencil, so you can't really see it well. But I do my own mapping. Now, when it comes to like terrain, if you're talking about miniatures and things like that, I will either find something on Pinterest or I usually play in person, and I'll use a regular flip map. If it's a game that is online, I will use pictures from the module itself. So the other night, I was using the maps that I found on D&D Beyond that were for the module I was running. So for like Descent into Avernus. Let's see. I don't know. Yeah, I can't pull them up on here right now. So that's what I use. Now, you can do all sorts of things. If you're using something like Roll20, you can pull in modular tiles, like pictures of modular tiles, and put them where you want and place things next to it. It's a lot of work. If you're playing online, if you don't have a good computer and you're also using Roll20 and Zoom or Roll20 and Discord and all sorts of different things, it can really bog your computer down. I'm on a Dell Inspiron 17-3000. It's got a solid state drive. It's $1,000 laptop, and this laptop sometimes struggles with trying to run multiple things. Like if I'm trying to host a Zoom call, do OBS for streaming it, and I'm trying to run, and a lot of it's OBS, but if I'm trying to also run, what was I going to say? Oh, and then run like Fantasy Grounds or whatever, and Zoom and all that, it's just going to start lagging really bad. So it says, I'm just starting to play D&D and I'm the DM. It's an all online campaign, Roll20. Okay. I'm trying to learn a lot fast. So are you guys using cameras at all? Or, I mean, if you're just using Roll20, you can buy all the stuff you need inside of Roll20. Because you're starting out, again, and I had said this earlier, I don't know if you're here for it, get like the Essentials kit or get the starter set. Run the module in those, and if you buy the Lost Minds of Phandelver or whatever inside of Roll20, you'll have all the assets you need. You'll have all the maps you need and things like that. I would not recommend to a brand new person to RPGs, I would not recommend for them to run a homebrew campaign. And that's just my take on that. To me, I think there's too much to try to learn. I've been playing games since like 1997 was when I started. I didn't play a ton. I had a hard time finding groups for a long time. It wasn't until 2010 when I started playing with my wife, and then I played at the time with my sister and her fiance. I started to grasp it a little better. A couple years into it, as a player, I felt pretty good. I thought I had an idea for what I liked, but I'd say it took 5 years before I felt, maybe 6 years before I felt comfortable running a campaign. And I did a lot of it homebrew too, and I think it made it harder. And then the more you play with different types of players, you're gonna see that there's so many different play styles out there. Making your worlds fun. It's a lot of fun. It can be hard though to run a game. The reason I say to use a module is, they've been doing this for 40 years, writing modules and how to run a game. Now, with running a module, you can still place those modules in your world. You can change the modules. But to me, that is like the outline. You're taking someone's paper that they wrote, you're changing a little bit about it, making it your own so you don't get in trouble for plagiarizing. And then you're running it for your group. No. So I have taken Horde of the Dragon Queen, the module, the very first one that came out for 5e. I have taken that and run it multiple times in my homebrew world, changed city names and things like that. And it's worked great. But yeah, it's running a campaign for the first time. It's not. It can feel overwhelming. It's not that bad, especially once you've run it. Run games a few times. I always say just rip the band-aid off or jump into the deep end right away. Just do it, and you're gonna experience all of it, and you're gonna learn as you play. And as long as your group is patient with you and you're patient with them, it'll be a good time. Don't punish them, especially since you're all new. Don't punish them for bad ideas or anything like that. It's really easy to make a judgment call and say, oh, well, they were dumb, so I killed them. Like, we all have horror stories about games we've played where, a DM has made a ruling that you didn't agree with because you had a different perspective. They didn't let you explain it and they just made a ruling. Just be patient and, try to adapt and figure out, like, if they say they want to do something and it doesn't make sense in your head as a DM, you're like, well, why would, and this is for you, Cameron, why would they tackle the bad guy off the bridge from hundreds of feet up? Oh, I never said it was hundreds of feet up. Like, ask them, are you sure you want to tackle the monster over the edge of the bridge, knowing how high up you are? If they say yes, let them do it. And, they die, they die, like, whatever. If they say, oh, yeah, I didn't realize we were that high up, then that's fine too. And then you just, you then let them change their mind, So there's a lot of ways to do it. Again, though, I would definitely run a module first, or at least read through a couple modules so you can see kind of what they do. So last night's game was a module that was Descent into Avernus, and I like to run shorter sessions. I like to run, especially online. Online for me, I don't like to go more than 3 hours. That game we're supposed to go 4 hours. The players got into a really rough situation. And we had already planned on, after they finished this portion of it, they were switching to new characters. You like that, Cameron? They were already going to be switching to new characters. And so we just decided to end the session a little bit early last night because of the situation they were in. It just made sense. One of the cool things, too, that as a player I love is ending... Man, excuse me. I'm burping. I don't know why. Ending a game that night on a cliffhanger. If you can end it on, like, oh yeah, you just defeated these goblins, like, the players are like spent, and then like an orc walks into the room, and like, or not an orc, an ogre, a 12-foot tall ogre, walks into the room. Your players are like, oh crap, like, we've blown all our spell slots. We're hurting because we've been fighting, whatever all day. And, it's going to give them that oh crap moment. And then you're like, and we'll figure out what happens next time. Players love that. It makes them think about, what they're going to do about the ogre for the next couple weeks until you play again. Cliffhangers are fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. If you have specific questions about, DMing, I'm happy to help you. I've played on Roll20. I've never run games on Roll20. Online, I prefer not to use miniatures. I like to use Theater of the Mind. Unfortunately, when you get into dungeons and stuff, I find it's really hard to do Theater of the Mind. And Theater of the Mind means you don't use any maps or miniatures. You just explain it and then react to what players do. When you play games Theater of the Mind, I highly recommend being loose with interpretation. So if you explain a situation to the players and how the room looks, and they say stuff that doesn't work with how you envisioned your thing, ask them for further clarification, and ultimately let them do what they're trying to do. Like if you're in a house and they say they want to swing from a chandelier, is it logical they'd have a chandelier there? Yeah? All right, let them. Maybe you never explained a chandelier. Or are they in a cavern and they want to throw dirt in something's eyes? You never explained like that it was like loose dirt or hard hard dirt or whatever, let it be what they envision. Or maybe there's sand. Let it be that. There's not rules in the book for something like that. You're going to have to make it up on the fly. You know, now I can tell you if a character can't see in 5e, they have disadvantage, and anything attacking them has advantage. So what I would do is I would just have them make a straight roll for it, and if it is higher than the armor class, go with it. Or you could do the opposite. You could say they're throwing dirt, right? Dirt's an area of effect. Let the monster make a dex save to get out of the way of it getting in their eyes or block their eyes. And come up with a number based on, you know, the DCs. If it's easy, it should be a DC 10. If it's moderate, it's a 15. If it's hard, it's a 20. You know, and go from there. A lot of D&D is just figuring it out as you go. But there are things that some of us who've been doing it for a while can definitely elaborate on and tell you how we would do it. But how I do it might be different than how Cameron does it. And how Cameron does it is going to be different than how Drakenstone does it. And, you know, everybody does it their own way, you know. Some of us change it based on the groups we're playing with, you know, like I have some groups who are into very lethal games. I have other groups that are more into wanting to tell more stories, and they don't want to feel like their back's against the wall all the time. So I adapt how I play for different groups too. You know, it just depends. We've got a couple games coming up on the channel that are going to feel very different than other games. For example, our Call of Cthulhu game on Thursdays is it's not safe for work, by the way. If you don't want to watch it in front of kids, like there's references to a lot of things in that game. It's a very fast-paced, action-oriented game. It tries to mix some horror into it, but it's more action-packed. If it was like a show, I can't even think of a show it would be in line with, but there's always some craziness happening. Whereas, say, my Blackrock game right now has turned into more of a dungeon crawl. It's a slower pace. There's a lot of combat, but it's still slower pace. The players like to role play a little more. You know, they like to investigate a little more. And so again, it's completely different. Beamer says, I already live in my own world, but nobody's brave enough to play in it. Why not, man? What's going on over there, Beamers? Yeah, I was not comfortable running modules for a long time. If you run a module, do not worry about changing things, making mistakes. Don't worry about any of that. You can change it however you want. If you want to change monsters, if you want to skip sections completely, whatever, you can do it. One, the players aren't going to know. Two, even if they did know, they shouldn't know what's going on in the module. If they do know what's going on in the module, they should not use that knowledge. So it's called meta knowledge when they are taking what they know from a book like this and applying that to how they react in character. You know, it's kind of like playing a video game then, rather than playing a role-playing game. As characters, they need to think, would my actual character know that specific thing? If they don't know that specific thing, you could leave it to a die roll. You know, maybe the player doesn't know that a Medusa can turn someone to stone. But maybe their character would know that. Maybe they're a certain kind of hunter or whatever. Let them roll for that. Maybe they could make a history check or an arcana check, or a nature check to know if it's that. Now, as the DM, you should make that call on which one they are going to roll for. And sometimes players will do this. They might make a case. They might say, hey, you know, I'm really good at this. To me, that might jive with this. Can I use this skill? You know, like a druid might say, I know a lot about creatures in forests. We're in a forest. This thing clearly lives in a forest. Can I make a nature check to know this? you might say yes. Whereas you may have been thinking, well, this is a magical creature, I want them to make an Arcana check. You can still do that, or you can go with the reasoning that the player presented. It's up to you. Some DMs are going to tell you there's, this way to do it. This is how I do it, and whatever, and that works for them. That's cool. Another DM, is going to run things more loose. I like to think I'm a more loose DM. I try to go with what my players want. It's one of the reasons I run my games mostly rules as written. I love talking about homebrew rules. I love coming up with my own. I love coming up with my own classes and all this stuff. But I will not force my players to play with some this rule that I have. I'll still use custom monsters. I'll still use other things no matter what, but I won't force them into using certain rules just because I think it's a fun idea. In fact, one of the things I have always liked doing is if you're playing a campaign, homebrew, when the players die, they come back at first level rather than whatever level the character was. I have not run games like that for most of my groups. Most of my players do not like that idea. They think it sounds terrible. Whereas I think, if your character dies, you should make one at first level again. It's not a popular idea. I've played with hundreds of people, and very few have been for that. Oh, man. So, Cameron says, don't fall into any specific style. It just gets in the way and screws up your development. You are you. Do things how you want to do them and be flexible. I agree, not falling into a specific style, but at the same time, if you have a specific style you like, don't force yourself not to do it because you don't want to get caught doing the same thing. I say keep an open mind or be flexible and try new things. So again, I started playing a long time ago. I was about 12 years old. Played very little, though, for a long time. And I used to think I was all about the combat. And I do love combat still. I didn't think I was into as much of the social interactions. When I would hear, especially around 2012 or 13, when I started my YouTube channel, if you watch early videos, I was definitely more about, building characters for combat and all these different things. I didn't put a ton of thought into, the more social aspect of the game. And I would say like 2014 or 15, because I started playing and running a lot of one-shots, I started trying new things. Played with a group that one of the things we did at the beginning of every session is you did your own narrative and monologue of how, you introduced your character for about 5 minutes to start the session. You might have a fighter who's in his room polishing his weapons, just describing the scene, right? Then you go to the next player and they would do the same thing. They describe the scene, paint the picture of what this player is doing or this character is doing. And then, end scene, we go to the next one. It was so foreign to me to play a game that way when I first did it. And I loved that narrative style. To me, that made a big impact. And even when we would role play the actual game itself, we would mention our internal character, our character's feelings and stuff. It was more like reading a book. You weren't reading a book, but when you would describe certain things, and it wasn't all the time. Don't get me wrong, but we would start with the introductions, and then maybe at one point in the game you might elaborate on how your character's feeling. You wouldn't do it for too long, because if you do it too long, it's kind of like stealing spotlights, and things like that. John says, well, I've watched other campaigns and read Lost Minds of Fandelver. Okay, perfect. So yeah, I don't think I would start with then an introduction to where the players are, start them together at all times, figure out before running a game how they all know each other. Do not let your group start off without knowing each other. Okay. I have no idea what an empire building campaign is or what Runeterra is. Never heard of those. Um, but yeah, make sure your player characters know each other right off the bat. And I would make sure each character knows at least two other characters. Or maybe you just have one big thing. You're all childhood friends. Boom. But some of the stuff I like to do is we go around the table with our players usually, and this character determines how they know the one next to them. I have random charts of how they know each other. In fact, let me pull one up. One of the more popular ones that I've used is actually from the original Pathfinder, and it was Ultimate Campaign Guide or something. I don't know. But the best thing I got from it is this one table. And it's relationship with fellow adventurers. So this player is going to roll how they know the one next to him. We go all the way around the table once. So they know this character, but then this character knows their character, right? Examples. Family. Maybe adopted siblings, whatever. Friend of a friend. Tavern buddies, hunting companions, contractors, former allies, former enemies, friendly competitors, romantic competitors. That's one in one of my games. So on and so forth. Best friends, former coworkers, veterans of a skirmish or a war, best friends, gaming or gambling associates. So stuff like that. Highly recommend that. Now, when you are running your game, one of the questions you would, I think, ask me the other day was you would have asked the DM if the shadow dropped anything. And I think I had replied back that I would look at the monster stat blocks. You know what? I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use D&D Beyond. So what I would do is I would refer to the monster stat block first. And let's go monsters. I'm going to share my website. All right. So on here, I would just go to a monster. So say they just fought a acolyte. This one's going to be more simple than another one. But looking at the acolyte, you would go, okay, so what treasure might they drop? Well, they're a person or a character that's living in this world. You can assume that they would reasonably carry some money on them. So maybe they have a change purse. Now, gold is a lot. Like one piece of gold, you should think of being like more than a day's worth of pay. In fact, I would probably refer to silver as our modern day dollars, right? So one silver might be like $1, or one silver might be 50 cents, or I don't know, however you want to. No, probably, yeah, I'd say $1, right? And then copper would be like your pennies, your change. Anyways, I'm getting hung up on bullcrap. Anyways, I wouldn't give them much. I would never give a human in my world more than like 30 gold that they're just carrying around on them, ever. 30 gold would be like thousands of dollars in my mind. 30 gold will buy you, I think, like what? A great sword or something? I'm not usually a player, so I don't usually have to worry about buying things. Let me pull it up. So yeah, 30 gold will buy you like a light crossbow. So I guess that would be more like hundreds of dollars if you relate it to our current times and what our modern weaponry would be. Like if you want to buy a handgun, you could probably get a handgun for like $500, right? So I would say that's like the equivalent of 30 gold. So I would probably say a human has upwards of that much. Now, a monster, like I try to apply more logic to something like that. So before I get into that though, so this guy would have had, say, 10 gold. He's got a club because that's his weapon, right? Acolytes probably wear robes. They are spellcasters, so they might have some sort of a focus. Maybe they have a spell book that has these spells in it. So that's how I would determine what this character had on them in the moment. Looking at a stat block and making assumptions based on the stat block. Now, something like an abyssal chicken, Okay. I'm just going to say right now, I would say there's nothing on this creature. Did it eat something? Maybe. Maybe it had a ring, that it ate. I don't know. Or maybe nearby it killed something that had something on it, or it killed an adventurer who had something on it. So rather than say this chicken has something, you could say like its horde might have something. Things like that. Abyssal chicken's probably not a great example, but like a dragon would have a treasure hoard or something like that. Asarak would have a treasure hoard. He's a lich. uh, So again, I try to apply some common sense to it. If I feel like it's a boss battle and they fought something big, maybe that big thing killed something that had treasure. And then in that case, I might give the players something based on that. Man, it's so hard trying to put my mind back in that original state where I didn't run a game. I can't think of, a lot of the questions you would probably have. I have had people ask a lot of questions though about treasure. I'm somebody who's more stingy. I don't give a lot of treasure in most of my homebrew games. Whereas when I'm running campaigns, I give a little bit more treasure. So yeah, there is that. But yeah, no, shadows they couldn't carry anything. They're like spirits. So I wouldn't say they had any treasure. So yeah, if you have any other questions though, I'm more than happy to answer. I'll also send you I'll send you some links to some videos I have too that I've talked about certain things. All right, let's go back to D&D Beyond though. So when talking about treasure, let's go to sources, Dungeon Master's Guide. There's some really good tables in here. And I don't do my encounters based on CRs. If you're going to do CRs, I would use Xanathar's Guide and how they do encounters. But yeah, the math just doesn't work if you're trying to make balanced encounters by CRs. Where is it? Types of treasure. Random treasure. Here we go. I just refer to my book usually rather than this. All right. So based on your challenge ratings, if you're using those on your monster stat blocks, it'll tell you what their CR is. If, say they're 0 through 4, you can decide to roll on this table percentile dice. And depending on what you get, that's the gold they get. Or copper or silver or whatever. Platinum pieces. There's also, when you get into, this is individual. So this is like every time you kill a single monster or a single bad guy, this is what they should have on them per the book. When you get to, here we go, treasure hoards. So if I do a dungeon, the boss in that dungeon probably has a hoard. This is where you'd roll for that. Now, if combined the challenge of the dungeon, so if all your monsters ends up being this, then you would roll on the chart. So this is 0 through 4. The things that would be scattered throughout the dungeon would be the things that you got on your die roll. So if you rolled between here, you're going to do 2d6, and that is going to be the amount of gold worth of gems. So you're going to have gems that equal that much gold. You're also going to roll a 1d4, and then that's going to tell you on magic item table B, which is right here. That's going to tell you what they get on here. So say you rolled 3 times, and then you got your percentiles. Boom. Now I have dice right here. So the first thing I rolled was 76%. So somewhere in my dungeon, there's going to be a dust of dryness. I rolled a 78. There's also going to be a dust of sneezing and choking. And the last thing was 51, a potion of water breathing. So based on this, I might say, okay, an alchemist, came to this dungeon and got killed, and there's his stuff, and you'd be able to find it on his body. Or maybe the bad guy, whether it's a person or a monster, would change a lot of how I would describe it. If it's a monster, you're probably just going to find it on the body. If it's a person, maybe they've taken those items or that bag, maybe it was their backpack or whatever. They've taken that and it's now in a different place. Things like that. The K5K treasure. Ever concerned about the economic shattering effects of adventures coming back with thousands of gold? Player character gives local farmer 100 gold for lulz. So I don't. I'm able to view the game as a game and not worry about the realism that much. But say the players do something like that, as a DM, I would react in a way. So maybe that farmer stops farming. Now you've caused a problem for the town. They're getting less crops or whatever. And, that takes time for it to impact them. So I wouldn't do it right away, but maybe after a couple adventures. Now the players are hearing that, old McDonald closed his farm down. There's no milk now. Maybe he's a dairy farmer. There's no milk now in the town, and now they can't make their signature dish and, whatever. And you change the economy because of it. Maybe now they have to order import milk. And again, you're not going to tell your players all these details, but the players might learn in a couple adventures that, oh, well, last time we were here, it only cost this much. Why did the price triple for our thing? Oh, why are less people, out and about at the tavern now? What's going on? Might have stuff like that without telling them the repercussions of what happened. They could either connect the dots in their head or figure it out through clues in game. But no, I don't get too caught up in the economy of it all. Not the finer details. But I do think that would be fun. I like the idea. I do a lot of campaigns around that. I've had quite a few campaigns where like a mine was closed for a long time and it reopened and it changed the economy. So I have done things in game that have altered the economy. But it's, again, I don't worry about, oh, the players have gotten thousands of gold now and they're back in this really tiny town and they basically give it away. I don't really worry about that much. Good advice of a right balance to strike was a big concern of old school players. That makes sense. It's funny to me because a lot of like older games, so I used to play advanced D&D, and then recently we were playing Rule Cyclopedia, which is Beckme. And I would say the rules are very restrictive, which to me takes away some realism in a lot of aspects. But then there's so many rules about stuff like the economy and jobs. And like, as you hit this level, now you can pay for like people to work for you. Like there's all sorts of those things that aren't in the new games, so it's kind of interesting to me. But yeah, I've played with some old school players, like in my AD&D game, that were trying to be more realistic, like more worried about the realism of certain things. Like I remember getting penalized for jumping off a horse in full plate, and they said, "Well, yeah, you're in really heavy armor, and you jumped off a moving horse." I was like, "Yeah, but I have 3 hit points. Hit points and of themselves are not realistic." Basically, by jumping off the horse and rolling a d6 and taking that damage, I could have died, like, by jumping, landing on my feet, and dying in full plate. In snow. I don't know. It's funny to me. Like, you can stub your toe in some of those old school games and die right then and there with no chance of survival. Crazy to me. Some DMs sit on the uber realistic end of the spectrum where having mass loot drop on a town would ruin the economy, so they start limiting loot. So the thing with money, though, is it can quickly get out of hand to the point where it means nothing in a game. That is probably why I'm a little more stingy on it. That's actually something I'm trying to do more of. I'm trying to be more loot friendly. But I think the part for me that I've always had, the problem I've always had, is after a little while, when you play in games where you get a lot of gold and things like that, it gets really tough because now money doesn't mean much. It really means nothing. They have plenty of it, nothing to worry about. Okay, so how do you make a good encounter table? So I don't. My random encounters are prepared. So when I'm prepping for a game, say I have a game next Saturday, which I don't for once, which is cool. But say I had a game next Saturday and I was like, okay, players are wrapping up this one dungeon. They're going to have to travel back to town. Once they're in town, they are then going to travel somewhere else. So from there, I will... Nice. My wife's threatening me with a drill. Maybe she's been watching TikTok where the wife uses the drill in the other room and the husband comes rushing to help her. Maybe that's what she's doing. I don't know. So yeah, players are at a dungeon, need to travel back to town. From town, are going to travel somewhere else, maybe another dungeon. Some people like to have random tables for the dungeon. So inside of, say, a cave, we'll say a cavern. You'll have one encounter table for there. You'll have another encounter table for the forest that they're traveling on. You'll have another encounter table for the city they're in. Another encounter table for the other forest because it's a different type of forest, or maybe it's not forest, maybe it's grasslands. And then another encounter table for the ruins that they're traveling to in these caves. Again, I don't do that. So what I would just do is I try to run things based on what I think might be there, that I think would be fun. So I know in the dungeon, they're going to fight an owl bear. That's where it lives. And there's a chance they might be attacked by wolves in the forest. So I will decide, I will prep an encounter for the forest of wolves, right? I will then decide there's a 20% chance the player, and I'll write just 20%. Boom. Have the stat block for the wolf. And then after I have the stat block, I will say, okay, there's going to be 6 of them. And I'll write hit points, maximum hit points for all 6. Give them their own spot on my paper. Boom. Then from there, I will, so say I made that the 20% chance. In town, there's a chance they might meet thieves. Right? So maybe 2 thieves. I don't know. Do the same thing. 5% chance. Or maybe I won't say 5%. Maybe I'll say if I roll a 1 on a D20, or, since something was 20%, say I roll a 4 on a D20 or less. And so then when the players are in places like the forest and they decide to camp, I will then take my D20 and roll. I got a 3. There's wolves that are coming tonight. Then the other, so I have some other stuff I do too. I do have special dice. As a new person, I wouldn't worry about stuff like this, but I have traps. So maybe there's a chance for a trap. I've got different monsters on this die. So there's like an aberration, which you can't tell, but I've got race dice. So on this, you have like half elf. Oops. Things like that. Just rolled dwarf. So I will use that sometimes too if I want something really random or I don't know. But usually I just wing it. If you do think having a random table will be fun for you and you want to make it yourself, one, you can find stuff out there. There's a website called donjon.com. If you look up random encounter generator or something, Don John might come up. Yeah, I don't know. I meant to type in random encounter generator in a search bar, but yeah. Anyways, you could do that though. But there's some good ones out there, and Donjon I think is one of the better ones. If you want to make balanced encounters, you can look at something like Kobold Fight Club. I think that does a decent job, but it's not accurate because the CR system's not accurate. There's a lot of things that the CR system doesn't take into account. It doesn't take into account your players' weaknesses. It doesn't take into account their strengths. For example, dwarves can't, I think they're immune to poison or they're less susceptible to poison. So it doesn't hurt them as much and doesn't impact them or whatever. So if you have a monster that does poison damage or applies the poison condition or any of that stuff, if you have an all dwarf party, it doesn't take that into account. And so they're going to stomp the floor with it. So running games, if you want balanced encounters based on things like that, you have to know what your players are good at, what they're weak at. Again, I don't usually worry about that. I think your job as a DM is to put things in the world and then just see what the players do about it. If they run, let them run. Maybe they don't get chased by the wolves. Maybe there's something else that gets the wolves' attention. I don't know. Maybe they do chase. The wolves do chase, and catch them. It's easy to say, oh, yeah, well, the players are slower than the wolves. The players are slower than the dragon. They're slower than this. If players want to run, a lot of times you should let them get away. I have yet to run into a system with the CR system that works the way it's advertised. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is pretty close, especially at low levels. It's pretty balanced. I would say some of the older editions, there were less, any system that's less abilities, like random abilities, that has a more, I don't know how to explain. Like, if you get rid of feats completely, get rid of every ability players have in 5e, it's going to be more accurate. Literally just make it d20 rolls with modifiers, especially the bounded accuracy. You're going to have really balanced things if your monsters are also set correctly. The problem is there's too many variables in 5e outside of the numbers that change things drastically. How much you reward inspiration. You're letting them roll with that, advantage a lot if you give inspiration a bunch. If you're somebody who doesn't give inspiration a lot, you're not helping your party very much, So there's a lot of stuff like that. The different types, like a druid at low levels in 5e can have 4 times the amount of hit points as a barbarian who is supposed to have the most with a d12, because they can change into different creatures. The types of monsters, if you have weak monsters, but 20 of them, and your party has area of effect, they're going to wipe those 20 creatures out quick because they're weak. If your players do not have area of effect, it's going to take a few rounds and they're going to get hit a lot. So again, the composition of the party makes a big difference when balancing encounters. So I don't think that should be your primary focus. I'm not saying throw like, a lich at them randomly at 3rd level. That's not smart as a DM. But I'm also not saying not to make that an option either. Heck, it would be kind of fun to meet a lich at low levels that doesn't waste his time knowing that you're weak. He can tell by looking at you, you're basic adventurers. You're not at his level. And so he just kind of scoffs at it. It's a waste of his time. A lot of ways you can do it. So anyways, I'm going to hop off here. But I did want to hop on and hang out with you guys for a while. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I like doing this. I try to do this every Sunday. Maybe I'll do it again next Sunday. If you have any questions, you can join my Discord, post them in there. You can message me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, whatever. And I will respond. Love talking about this stuff, obviously. And yeah. So anyways, with that, guys, thanks for watching. If this is your first time here, smash that subscribe button, give us a like. And if you want to support us, we do have a Patreon link in the description. For just $1 a month, you get access to any random tables I make. So we do make encounter tables. We do make trinket tables, things like that. You get access to all of that. Also, anything else I release to my patrons, pretty much. So you also get a chance to play with me in a streamed game. So with that, once again, guys, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Game on.